Good evening, all. Thanks for joining us on this week's weekly wrap. Got pretty full packed house tonight. We've got Dave, James, and Rory to talk AP McCoy, Newbury, Mr. Mall, AP McCoy, Leopardstown, and AP McCoy. Dave, what we'll do is we'll start with you. You're a fully paid up member of the Mr. Mall fan club. I think we've got to talk about the performance. Mr. Mall whipping around at the start, giving away 10 lengths and sauntering clear, and messing up with, well, not messing up, but shaking up the champion chase market. And then also, if you want to roll into talking about AP McCoy, and then we can all go from there. So, lead away, Dave.
Okay, all right then, Mr. Mole. Yeah, Mr. Mole. I've always liked Mr. Mole. You know, I've always loved Mr. Mole. I always loved the way he travelled over hurdles. I love the way that he was able to sort of give weight away to good handicap hurdlers, and always looked like he could saunter past them when he felt like it. And whatever his issues were, whatever the problems were, you would say they're nearly sorted out. I mean, Saturday again was a sort of a step back, but equally, you know, at that point when he's done that, the old Mr. Mole might well have just decided, in horse and jockey's credit, that he was able to get back into it and bringing it way back on the bridle again, 2 out. He's got bags of speed. The key to this horse is speed. He's got so much speed that he is going to be. He has to be given a serious chance in what's looking already like a fairly substandard champion chase, because he's going to get the race run to suit. His jumping's still not perfect. He at times he still looks like he's a little bit of an accident waiting to happen. I dare I say, touch wood. I mean, I hope to God that doesn't happen. But whatever Paul Nicholls has done in terms of sorting his head out, he's shown here that he can come from behind. You know, the tactics that have been suiting him this season are going from the front. Clearly are needed now. He's far more versatile than he's been given credit for. I think he's a proper player. I really do. I'm not just saying that because as I say, I've always liked the horse, but he has to be given serious consideration in what's going to be a below par champion chase this year. AP, what do you want me to say about AP, Dan? What my favourite ride is? How sorry I'll be to see him go. All that
we could talk about favourite ride, because Racing UK obviously spent the whole day talking about favourite rides, but obviously you can't mention it an at the races ride. So was there a best at the races ride for you today?
Well, the one that's
must be someone on your top there. Synchronised.
Well, there's a couple riding your tops. Obviously, the first time he was ever on Takanda Soy was a joy to behold. But for me personally, a personal highlight would obviously be the day that he rode that 4,000th winner at Toaster, and it was very much something that sort of got a little bit lost at the time, was how much that was a sort of typical McCoy ride on a horse that really wasn't doing a fat lot, 2 out, looked like it was beat, and he's galvanised it up the rail. And the only man that was disappointed to see Mountain Tunes win was poor old Richard Lee, who looked absolutely downtrodden afterwards, as Crispin looked like it was going to absolutely hack up from 2 out. Well, that was a typical McCoy ride. And I was lucky enough that day to have a press pass and be really close up to all the action, and they were coming back in, and lucky enough to be at the press conference afterwards, all that. So that would be a personal highlight for me, yeah.
Rory, come to you just touching and staying with AP McCoy. I know there's a lot of talk about being the best rider or the greatest rider. I think he even himself admits that he's not the most stylish of riders. But what's impressed me most is, given the change in the RIT rules and all the talk of that, I thought one of the jockeys who might struggle initially would have been AP McCoy, but the way he's been able to change his style, and obviously he's strong in the upper body, which Ruby Walsh pointed out when he did a piece on Racing UK. But I just think he's been able to change with the times. He's been able to improve as a jockey throughout the times, and also I think he's doing a lot of work now with the nutritional side as well. So he's going to be giving something back to the game. Was it just a case of his determination just kept him ahead of the curve in comparison to all of his ring route colleagues?
Yeah, that has to be a major part of it. I mean, you'll hear no end of this over the next few months, and it'll be deemed to be a great marketing tool for racing, which is a shame really, because this is not about commercialization of the sport. It's about honouring one of the greatest participants in the sport that we've ever seen. And to be honest, he's not the best rider riding at the moment. You'll hear everyone will tell you he is now for the next few months. But if you had announced his retirement and you asked 100 race readers or 100 experts who the best jockey riding today is, they'd say more would say Ruby Walsh than Tony McCoy. But could Ruby go to the well as often as Tony McCoy? I think the answer to that is a fairly obvious no, and it's a no for virtually every jockey who's ever lived. Peter Scudamore being the closest to him in terms of resilience and desire to win, and the desire to just keep going back after any kind of reverse, whether that's a shock defeat or an injury or whatever it happens to be. He's frightening. He is absolutely frightening in the way that he constantly wants to win, and it's not just winning championships. It's every single victory that counts for him, and it is a little bit of an obsession, I suppose. And I have to say, I'm reasonably pleased to hear his announcement. I have been expecting it for a while. It was always going to be a surprise when he announced it on any day, and the day he did came as a big surprise, because you don't expect that kind of announcement from a jockey riding at the top of his game. But he, realistically, getting to 5,000 winners was a non-starter. He'd broken all the records. He was taking the falls a bit harder. You know, he had that issue last autumn where he was riding through an injury, and even John Joe O'Neill said he wished he'd taken a fortnight off, or wished he'd quit earlier than he had. And there comes a stage where you won't come back, and I think he was under pressure from Chanel particularly to call it a day at the end of the season or during the season or whatever it happened to be. So it's not a massive surprise that he's done that, but he is unique in the way he's gone about his business for 20 odd years, and it's amazing that someone that hungry when he was so young could still be that hungry now. He's not quitting because the desire's gone, which, you know, most jockeys of his age, most people who've won what he has, that's what it comes down to in the end. You begin to lose the will to go on. Your ability dips slightly, and then you wake up one morning going, what am I doing this for? And he didn't come to that point. He quit on a high, or he announced his retirement on a high. And you know, it's tremendous to see him. I'm going to be bored silly every other day. We're going to have tributes to Tony McCoy, and I'm going to be fed up to the back teeth with it very quickly. But that's not his fault. It's our fault for not being able to think of anything else to do. So we'll go through the merry-go-round, and the next time we do one of these, I will be tearing my hair out, no doubt. But the man's a legend and deserves all the credit he gets.
I will all be catching AP McCoy. We'll talking about uniqueness there. Is it a time to put Paul Nicholls in the same bracket with what he's done with Mr. Mole? He's AP McCoy, when he was getting interviewed by Rishi Prasad, he said that he never actually had the belief in the horse to be as good as what Paul always thought he was, and he's shown him he's proved AP McCoy wrong this year. Has he proved you wrong this year, Rory, Mr. Mole?
No, he will do if he wins a champion chase, or indeed if he finishes second in a champion chase. But he hasn't. I heard Dave refer to his problems. He's never had any problems, really, has he? His problems have been entirely in his head. Although there is this issue about the fact that, like Tidal Bay, he's got this high head carriage, which is a purely natural thing. A lot of horses have it and get criticised for it, even though that's just the way they are. You can only criticise what a horse does rather than the way it carries its head. And plenty of horses do have that slightly unusual neck angle, which people immediately decide is a sign of ungenuineness when it isn't necessarily the case. And Tidal Bay was probably 11 or 12 before people realised what a good horse he was. But again, Paul Nicholls deserves a huge amount of credit for being able to turn a horse like Tidal Bay around. He didn't do it immediately. He hated Tidal Bay when the horse first arrived in the yard. He was interviewed about him, and there was no affection for the horse at all with Nicholls. And he's a man who's been very affectionate about his horses in the past. He thought Tidal Bay was just a horrible thing, and he had lots of problems. He apparently purged regularly at home, and he was horrible to do, and he was vicious and nasty, and nobody liked him in the yard. But he didn't give up on the horse. He didn't think, well, I'll just hit the training fees and hope I can get a couple more horses from these rich owners. He turned the horse around, and he got him right, and he got him winning big races when he should have been over the top. And his patience is remarkable, because he's not naturally patient at all, Paul Nicholls. He's had to teach himself to be like that. There was that season when Martin Pipe was still training, when the two of them were involved in a battle, not so much a battle for the championship, but it was a real hate match, wasn't it? They absolutely loathed each other, and they were desperate to win the championship. And Paul Nicholls probably did things that year that he regrets. But Assertio particularly suffered, and horses were run frequently at the end of the season who shouldn't have been from both yards. Pipe had a very, very nice horse called Joachi, who could have been a Gold Cup horse, who I think probably got ruined through that as well. But I think he regretted that he was carried away with that battle, and it meant that much to him. Whereas now he realises that the longevity of his horses and getting the very best out of them in the long term is more important. And I think, if you've got a trainer who's naturally patient in the first place, that's second nature. But I don't think it has been second nature to Paul Nicholls. I think he's had to change his way of thinking and change his attitude. And anyone who can do that, again, deserves credit. He wouldn't be my favourite guy in the world, but he's a consummate professional who keeps getting better. And people have suggested, with his firepower having dropped off in the last couple of years, that he would struggle to match strides with Nicky Henderson. He hasn't tried to do that. He hasn't thrown all his resources at the early races to try to keep up with Nicky Henderson. He's just done what's right for the horses, and he's ended up flourishing as a result. So, kudos to him.
That he is. James, for you, AP retiring, there's going to be plenty of good horses next year, the likes of Jolly Allen, Yanmouth for possible taking over the JP McManus fold. Is there anyone for you you'd like to see in those silks going forward, and what did you make of Mr. Mole's performance and also those horses in beyond? I think Uxie Zondra could be going for the Ryanair now, and Saïd Agrouji, is he got to all approve on the biggest stage at Cheltenham in March?
Well, firstly, the first part of the question about who I'd like to see take McCoy's job. I'd like to see Paul Townend get it. I think it'd be good to see him taking rides off Ruby for a change, and I think he deserves to be the number one in some important role. And I think he's proved recently that he can go and not that he probably needed to, but he can go anywhere and win big races. But I mean, the obvious person was obviously Barry Geraghty, and he's probably the best person you could possibly have. But he's always had a slightly different role to like when Ruby was riding for Nicholls and McCoy. Recently with Henderson, he doesn't ride as much, doesn't go everywhere. He goes to the main races, and I'm not convinced he's desperate to go trudging up and down the country all the time in the McManus role. If it's a slightly watered down version, it might be one he takes, but I don't think it's a given that it's going to go to Barry Geraghty. But in terms of Mr. Mole and the game spirit of the weekend, it's funny because I wasn't convinced he put himself into the Champion Chase picture last time. Some people were, but he definitely has done now. But again, he won a reasonable handicap, and then this time he's won a race where his two main rivals have failed to complete. And Uxie Zondra definitely underperformed, and Saïd Agrouji probably needed the race. So I'm not absolutely convinced he's brilliant yet, but to wheel around at the start, give all that ground, then look like you're going to win easily, even if Saïd Agrouji hadn't fallen over. You've got to take him seriously now. I think in the Champion Chase, if he needs to be ridden out the front, again, he'll be taking on Champagne Fever probably, and that'll give him a new challenge to really go head-to-head with someone that's going hard at it. But, he's much more a player than I expected, and with dodging bullets now, Paul Nicholls has got a couple of fearsome contenders there that you can find holes in, but should definitely play their part. Saïd Agrouji was disappointing, wasn't it? He was very sticky jumping. It was quite reminiscent of Denman actually. When McCoy, interesting enough, took the ride for the first time at Newbury, Denman made a bad mistake and then came down. I think it was either the same fence or the next fence, and it was very similar to that. It's, I think you'd be much happier to write that off as a bad run and forgive him than you would say Sprinter Sacco, who had a different sort of problem and didn't quite have the same incredible zest as he did in the past. But it was still slightly concerning, and I think it'd be difficult to justify piling into him now for the champion chase after that. Uxizondra was very, very disappointing. I was quite surprised when McCoy took the ride on Mr. Mole ahead of Uxizondra. I mean, obviously he ran badly at Christmas and gave him no fun at all in Leopardstown, but I was quite convinced Uxizondra was going to be a proper top-class 2-miler, especially after the Schlur. But these two last performances have, made me a bit downbeat, and they can blame the ground, but I think he's been really disappointing, and I'd happily put a line through it. And it's interesting you say Ryanair. I hadn't heard he's going for that, but could be an option. But I think he's just not quite the same horse he was at the start of the season. Whether he's failed to train on or go on this season, or whether Simply Ned and Dodging Bullets on that day just weren't at it, I'm not sure. But it's a shame because I had high hopes for him, and they're probably not going to be met this season.
At the moment for you, who's the most solid option in the champion chase?
Well, I still think Champagne Fever, but then again, he could easily end up in the Ryanair. He's entered this week at Gowran and Ascot over 2.5 miles. So I think if they decide that's the route to go, and he can just go flat out from the off, I think he's a pretty solid option. He's been the one I've been interested in most. His 2-mile form at Cheltenham particularly is so strong. I just think that needs to be the way he goes.
Dave, I'm guessing it's Mr. Moore for you.
It's too embarrassed to reply.
And Roy, is it a solid option for you in the champion chase? Is the one?
I still think it's a difficult race to get involved in without listening very closely to the vibes about Sprinter Sacco. I still think he's the key horse in the race. Ascot, we discussed it, was one of those races where you could come to any conclusion about it. I didn't think he looked like he'd gone at the game, but at the same time, we don't know whether he was hard fit and wasn't going to come on for the run. He was very much looked after, but maybe he was looked after because they think that they don't have much, beneath the surface of the bridle. They might think that there's nothing there, but you will find out. He's been weak in the market for this, despite the fact that Sire de Grugy was disappointing. Just to touch on Sire de Grugy, I'm massively concerned about his jumping, which is an obvious thing to say, but if you looked at him last year, he was a horse who always answered a call from his jockey. When Jimmy Moore said, take off outside the wings, he did, and he was spectacular. And Jimmy asked him twice to stand off the fence, and he wouldn't do it at the weekend. And I think that has to be, there has to be a concern that the reason he's not doing that isn't because he's not fit, because horses who are fresh but not fit will do that and get tired. But if he's unwilling to do what he's able to do last year, that suggests that it's a throwback to the injury, whatever that might be, and it's a huge concern to me. So I couldn't have him now, for all he was a horse who was hugely underappreciated last year. I still think this race could be thrown completely out of kilter by Willie Mullins. I know Willie's not the type to run a novice in the race, but I think he's got 2 or 3 horses who might be able to win the Arkle, and there is still the big possibility that Undersow could run here. There is a supplementary stage, isn't there? Or we passed that today?
No, I think there is.
No, I think there's a supplementary to come. This is still one more.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. If there is a supplementary, I'd rather it was in earlier than later. It ruins Andy Paul's betting. If Undersow runs in the race, he wins it. The suggestion at the moment is he's almost certain not to run. But Willie changes his mind up until the last minute, so you'll be watching those supplementaries very closely. I suspect that Willie doesn't want to run novices in non-novice races, and therefore he will probably fight against supplementing him, but he's an absolute machine, and this is not a strong... I couldn't have... I think Paul Nicholls has done very well with his pair, but I would be bitterly disappointed if either Dodging Bullets, who's never run well in the spring in his life, or Mr. Mole is good enough for this. And again, Mr. Mole's a horse who's been set up in the past for a spring campaign and disappointed. And Champion Favourite was one that I would have been very keen on. He really impressed me in the King George, despite me thinking that he wouldn't stay. He didn't stay, but I thought everything else he did was really good. But then he disappointed last time out. So he was beaten. For me, he was beaten when he fell at the last on his later start, despite the fact that he was able to dominate. And Ruby Walsh never looked happy on him. So that's a question for me now. So it's a very difficult race to have a punt in, but there are very few in the betting that I like at all in this race. And you know, if we start getting excited about Sprinter Sakura again, then you know he might be the one. But again, you couldn't possibly back you could no guarantee of a run for half your runners in here, including Sprinter Sakura. So I'll wait to see if they stick on the So in. I might back on the So anyway at big odds, on the basis that if they do supplement him, he'll be the high horse of the race. And I believe that Willie could easily win the Arkle with his inverted commas second string, whatever he happens to run in the race. So watching brief at the moment.
One which does, a novice which does has all options open is Cornigree, with the RSA and the the RSA and the Gold Cup after winning the Denman Chase at the weekend. Rory, you're a fully paid up member of the Cornigree fan club.
Yeah.
It continues to grow by the day. Where would you go, RSA or Gold Cup?
Could miss Cheltenham altogether and just prepare him for the Hennessy next year.
Off 166?
Yeah. But yeah, the handicapper has pretty much screwed him, it has to be said. I was surprised. Well, I was a little surprised he went for the Aon, but it makes sense. My argument about the Aon, the Denman, let's call it, when I was asked about this a week ago, was the worry is that he win the race and he win the race well because it will suit him ideally. He's well suited to Newbury. He was always going to be the one who would lead in that field, and he was going to be difficult to pay back. It would almost force the hand to running in the Gold Cup, and he's not yet as good as he looked at Newbury. He's very good, and I like him enormously. But as has been pointed out by a few people, he's got a massive handicap mark now because he has had the opportunity to suggest that he is that good. Every run has seen him to best effect. The only time he ever looked in any trouble was early on at Kempton when he was taken on for the lead by Alan King's beast. Carrickmore, who is the kind of horse who's capable of, one of the very few who's capable of out-jumping Tony Greer. You know, on occasion he can be very bold, and he was bold at Kempton, and that was in danger of putting Carrickmore off. Carrickmore stuck in his inside. But it was clever of Nico de Boinville to manage to get him to the outside of Carrickmore, and then that horse fell, which enabled Tony Greer to find his rhythm. And that's hugely important. At the moment, he's a horse who's barely been headed in his runs over fences. Bear in mind his connections were up in arms about the fact that they would have to run him in a graded chase first time out. You know, as if this was too much to ask, and now they want to run in the Gold Cup. Novices do have a bad record in the Gold Cup, but then again, not many try, and most who do try think they're running in the Gold Cup in a weak year. That's why they try. The problem with Gold Cups in weak years for exciting novices who tend to do all the winning from the front is that those novices have no experience of being taken on in a race. And therefore, in a weak Gold Cups tend to be strong in terms of numbers, and a lot of horses hunting for glory. They tend to be attritional affairs, and they tend to be races where they go hard from an early stage, which makes it difficult for a horse who wants to dominate small fields. And that's the problem with Cornigree this time. He might be good enough to get away with it. You know, he's a thoroughly likeable horse, but the Gold Cup is all about experience. You know, very few Gold Cup winners go there with 2 or 3 runs or fences under their belt. You could argue that Quingree doesn't even have the experience for the RSA at this stage. And people will say, but he beat older horses. He doesn't know what he beat at Newbury, does he? Because he never saw another horse. He had a schooling round. It was an exceptionally good schooling round, but he was allowed to do his own thing. And if the Gold Cup was about sending 20 horses out individually to jump around the course and then award the Gold Cup to the one who did it fastest, then Coney would have a great chance of winning. But, it's going to be a roughhouse contest, which he may not be prepared for. I'd be delighted if he ran and won. It'd be wonderful. But it would be asking a lot of him to do something that he's never experienced before. And that's the worry about him running in the Gold Cup. The RSA is also going to be a difficult race to run in as well, because he'd be up against the likes of King's Palace, who wants to go that way as well. And the RSA is historically has been a difficult race for classy horses to run in, because it has been something of a cavalry charge and a race that can be very tough on horses and take a long time to get over. It's rebuilding its reputation now that you have 3 major novice chases at the festival and a handicap option as well. It's becoming a slightly more sedate affair, and a slightly an affair that now suits class a lot more. So that would be the obvious route for him. But you don't have to run the Cheltenham Festival. Although I think now that they've set their stall out, they are pretty much happy to choose between A and B. But it might not be in the horse's best interest to be thrown into that cauldron straight away anyway. It's a bad experience it will be his first Cheltenham Festival, won't it? Because of course he missed the second half of his Hercules campaign. So that's horses. If you look at the trends for Cheltenham over and over, not a massive trends man, but experience at the festival itself is very important. We know Coney Hampton's Cheltenham is a dual winner there over hurdles, so that won't be an issue for him. But the festival is just something else altogether.
Yeah, Dave. Obviously, with all the trends things at the moment, a lot of people are just pretty much going saying just print off the results for the last 4 years at the festival, and then that's your starting point, and then go from there. But Dave, you've always liked Coney. We talked off air about. I think was it Bumper or first time up over hurdles? He won at Uttoxeter, and he just smashed them. And then obviously before injury struck, he was beating decent horses of novice contests at Cheltenham. For you, is it pretty much just look at the market and say he's better chance in the RSA than he's got in the Gold Cup, so that should be his option to go for, or does the possibility of, as Rory said there, being taken on for the lead by a decent sort, well, a more than decent sort in King's Palace, possibly put them off and edge them towards Gold Cup?
Yeah, you were right what you said about Coney. He won both his Bumper and his first hurdle race at Uttoxeter. First time he went over hurdles at Uttoxeter, he beat Corin 20 lengths. Now that's that looking back now is a tremendous performance. Something that's been missed, and it's something that I sort of talked about off camera with Rory over the weekend. Where everybody was sort of immediately divided up between RSA and Gold Cup. He's got to go for this one, or he's got to go for that one. He may end up going for neither on ground, because I do think he's rather dependent on the Benson Cup, and the drying weather's coming. It seems that there's no at the moment. The long range forecast is for it to stay mainly dry over the next few weeks. If we get to Gold Cup day and we get quick ground again as we did last year, I don't think he'll act on it. I simply don't think he'll act on it. I think he's got a very round action. He definitely needs some sort of cut in the ground. So that would be a massive worry for me, whether it be RSA or Gold Cup. The first thing you've got to look at is what sort of ground you're going to get on the week. As Rory says, you don't have to go for either. But I suppose with, as I was reminded at the weekend, none of us are getting any younger, and all right, he's not got many miles on the clock, but he is an 8-year-old. I think it will be a case of them probably seizing the moment and going down the Gold Cup route. I would personally, I've always been a believer in that's what your novices are for. You're there to win your novices, and then you step up the year after. That's always been my belief. I can see the argument, of course. I can see the argument for going for the Gold Cup after such a performance. you're beating Umon Zobo on a home turf almost. You know, Umon tends to run his race more often than not on ground that he would have liked, and he's beaten him with a degree of authority. So of course I can see the argument for going for the Gold Cup. But I do think, you know, they need to leave all options open. It wouldn't be a surprise to me at all if he didn't, if you know, with the drying weather, if he didn't turn up at Cheltenham at all.
James, what did you make of Conor Greaves' performance, and what of King's Palace? Obviously, he didn't really have to beat much on Saturday, but was there enough there? Because a lot of talk last year was about how he didn't come through, like as what Rory said about dodging bullets about the second half of the season. Was there enough there to even negate those doubts to a point, or do you still want to see him do it on a big stage like the Cheltenham Festival this season?
Well, I don't think it would negate any doubts, that performance. I think it was basically a performance to generally ignore. I think Scudamore was determined to win as easily as he could, and he probably would have won quite handsomely had he not nearly come down. I think it was second last or the same or the fence before. Without that mistake, it would have been very easy. Otherwise, he's jumped very well as he has done in his previous chases at Cheltenham. I think he's more solid than many people make out. But then that fact that he bombed out at last year's festival is just always there in the back of your mind, and will make a lot of people like me try and look elsewhere. But I think it was generally a performance. It was clearly just for you know, a prep, fitness run, nothing to beat, which is a shame. But generally, I think you look at his previous chase runs, and I think they're impressive. And his jumping is, like Conagry, is so good. He has to be, you know, as huge a player as his price suggests. I was massively impressed with Conagry. I thought his jumping was even better than it had been before. And the cross fence, I looked through on my binoculars, and I swear Rich Johnson saw a strider somewhere in the back straight. He took off so early, picked it out, and it was just, I think he basically killed the race there, because they were sort of coming behind him, and Udon Zobo was making a charge, and he just cleared away and took off, and that was them, hit them left for dead. I thought in that race, I thought Takan Soy was nice to see him run a good race again. He struggled earlier on in the season with John Joe out of form, and I still think he'll be a 3-miler at some stage, but he hasn't really had the chance to prove it. And there again, he probably needed the race a bit. As I said, his blood only come right about 10 days ago. But on the face of it, it looked like he didn't stay, and so now he's going to the Ryanair. And I think that was enough positive signs in that race. You know, he came there travelling best behind Conagry between the sort of fourth and third last, before sort of stopping on the run to 2 out. That I'd happily back him for the Ryanair. I think if he got there. You know, today more of that's doesn't seem to like going to Cheltenham, so it's always that risk. But he's right back into contention, having lost it completely, I thought, after the Betfair.
Elsewhere on the card on Saturday, obviously we had the big handicap hurdle, and also at Warwick we had Vibrato Valtat winning the Kingmaker. Dave, over the cards on Saturday in England, was there any performances which took your eye in any of the races? Dave?
Oh, sorry, Dan. It's all right. Yeah, we do need to. You mentioned Vibrato Voltat there, and he's another one very much in the same mould, I suppose, of Paul Nicholls, in the same way that he's managed to sort the head problems out of Mr. Mole. Perhaps Vibrato Voltat was called a few rude names last season, but whatever those rude names were, I think they've long since gone, and this was quite a taking performance, I thought. People said after the race, you know, that Top Gamble, who looked impressive this season in a couple of victories, you know, well, he didn't jump as well, and therefore, you know, Vibrato Voltat didn't really have a lot to beat. But to be fair, the reason that Top Gamble, you know, Paul Maloney was constantly asking him for a long one, was to try and keep the Nicholls horse at bay, to be quite honest, because he was travelling so well in behind. So he's almost sort of forced him into the mistakes, I would say. And again, you know, he's come away and he's still in second gear. Very impressive. Again, another one that perhaps you'd want to see a little bit of rainfall, I think, before Cheltenham. But he does look a player now. He does look a player. You sort of forget the rude names. He's definitely a player in the article. And I think the other one we need to give a mention to is the first winner at Newbury as well. I think Q of John Ferguson's. That was a monster performance, wasn't it? I mean, that was a very, very impressive turn of foot that he's shown after the last. And he's travelled well throughout the race, and he just looked absolutely different class. Where they go with him, I don't. Maybe he's going to end up being a flat track horse. I don't know, but very, very impressive also.
James, was there anything in the UK on Saturday for your Supreme Notebook?
Well, yeah, QE in that race, I think that was quite a strong novice hurdle, and he was very impressive. Quite, some turn of foot there to go clear of Cardinal Water, who was also a reasonable flat horse, and he was travelling well, and then QE just whooshed past him under McCoy, and he hung left again, which he had done at Haydock actually in that bad ground when he was trying to pick up. And that would be a slight concern, but otherwise he's very impressive, and his jumping sort of improved quite considerably as the race went on, and that was a nice sign. And he's probably, he's not the sort of horse I generally think of for the Supreme anymore, but he's got so much pace, they could find him difficult to live with. In behind there, I've got to mention Bouveroy, who I mentioned previously, and he ran, I thought, a solid enough race. I think he's a Fred Wentz contender this season, and he wore a hood this time, is a bit more settled, stayed on quite well at the end, having sort of been outpaced, and I think fast run, big field race at Cheltenham with uphill finish. I still think he's a player in that. Elsewhere on the cards for next season, novice hurdle, I was impressed with Bouveroy for Henderson, Harfeld to Punchestown and Tistry, and I don't think either of those have quite reached their potential in the end. I hope this one can, because he travelled really well, having called hard at the start, and he seemed quite daunted by the whole thing in the paddock beforehand. But he looked like his winner before being out-battled by an older, tougher horse. But, I think next season he's one to look out for as having the potential to become some sort of, some sort of Neptune contender maybe. Because I was really quite impressed with that performance, and he's probably the one from Bumper I'd like to take away. Elsewhere, I think at Warwick again, there was an interesting find for Robert Walford, his French import called Camping Ground. Only 5, but he won really quite impressively under Paul Townend in the handicap chase, and I think he's one to look forward to in the next couple of seasons.
And Rory, yourself, you've not really touched on the Newbury Betfair hurdle. There was a good ride by Josh Moore on Violet Dance, who took the race by the scruff of the neck coming into the straight or just entering it. Any hard looks in behind, stories in behind, and not any?
Yeah, I thought Violet Dancer was rather than one that got away. He was beaten at 1-5, 2-11 in a flat maiden at Lingfield in his previous start. But it's a race that Gary Moore's always targeted, and we tend to always look for one. And given how compressed these handicaps are these days, it's always an advantage to have less than 11 stone, but so few horses do. And he snuck in. That's a very American thing to say, isn't it? He got in with 10 stone 9, and everyone talked beforehand about how it would suit hold-up horses. If you've ever watched the Betfair hurdle, it never suits hold-up horses. 2 years ago, the first 4 home were the first 4 over the first hurdle, and it's a difficult race because of the way of where the race starts. Those who sort of file out last tend to be left standing as the race starts, and it always suits horses who race handily as long as they look after themselves. And Josh Moore just got Violet Dancer out in front, given an uncomplicated or close to the front, given a very uncomplicated ride, and he clearly set up for that and did it well. Those who came from off the pace who shaped well, Activial's definitely got a big race in him. He's still got a bit to learn. He's still a tiny bit raw, but Harry Fry's been looking after him, and he's been. I've backed him for the champion hurdle, as I said. I probably said that last week. On the off chance that he might turn up at a big price, just throwing a few quid at him at several hundred to 1. He's not going to turn up for the champion hurdle now, and he's got a hell of a lot of improvement to find. But I don't know what the handicappers. You can tell me what the handicappers done, Dan. You look at this. He was rated 143 coming into it, wasn't he? And he's finished 3rd. I thought he was a lot better than their results. Not many horses made significant late inroads there, and he I thought did very well indeed. Looks like, if the racing book is correct, he's not gone up in the weights at all.
No, he hasn't.
In which case, he's an absolute certainty for the World Cup.
There you go. Heard it to you first.
Four handicap winners I've given you already at the Cheltenham Festival. Just
Right, yeah, I'm gonna end up having a handicap each way lucky 15 or something.
Each way? What's the point of doing it each way?
Well, you might as well take advantage of these extended place times.
Yeah, you don't get fancy place times at this stage. I'm slightly disappointed in talking about the handicaps to hear that Lucinda Russell, who's got he's not well handicapped now, but disappointed how much he went up. Thorndal Knight, who I like enormously, they are thinking about running them at Ascot at the weekend and then thinking about what race to run them in at Cheltenham. And that's not the way you win handicaps at the Cheltenham Festival. You don't run them at Ascot a few weeks beforehand to see where you stand. You work out where you stand in the first place. So he either gets beaten at Ascot and the handicapper doesn't drop him, and then you don't fancy him as much for anything at Cheltenham, or he wins at Ascot, which would be a big surprise given how tough the race he's in is. And then you're given a much stiffer task at Cheltenham, so that's a little off-putting, but hopefully he won't run at Ascot. And he'll go into a race like the Kimure, which he will win putting it hard. But yeah, Activia caught the eye. The other horse that caught the eye, again, I said Activia was a little bit raw. Jolly's Cracked It is a lot more raw than Activia, and did tremendously well, having been in a terrible position after 2 hurdles to finish 5th. That was, I give him no chance on Saturday, given his inexperience in the race, and he did very well to finish as close as he has. He's an Imperial Cup horse, I thought Jolly's Cracked It. He's done very well at Ascot. I think he might well be at least as well suited by a right-handed track. He doesn't jump well enough to really be a supreme contender, but off a mark of 140, and the handicapper might have dropped him fine for that, but I wouldn't have thought so. He'd be interesting if Harry Fry decided to go the Imperial Cup with him. So it's slightly odd finding 2 Harry Fry horses, but he's going to be that kind of trainer, Harry, isn't he? He's very good with his hurdlers. He's very adamant about where he wants his horses to run and when he thinks they shouldn't run. And if anyone listens to him, then the horses are looked after. And if you can find the targets, they're still 140 according to the Racing Post, though. But there's always the worry that they haven't updated the site. He's interesting for that. And any 140 plus rated hurdler from the Harry Fry yard, you can back to the races he targets.
Yeah, I think look, we've talked previously about High Fry certainly going forward, and obviously Jolly's Cracked It's that experience in the Tolworth behind Lammy's Surge, and see what he does see what Jolly's Cracked It does in the Imperial if he does go there. Obviously on Sunday we had 4 Grade 1s, lucky enough to be there. It's for me it's the best cards away from any of the festivals in one day. AP McCoy stole the show again on Carlingford Lock. But James, will come to you for the novice races, most notably the Deloitte, because no doubt it had an impact on your Supreme blog, which you write in the week. Nichols Canyon, Ruby Walsh from the front, had it his own way. Never saw another rival. There's talk about Supreme, and there's talk about the Neptune. Where would it go for you? And obviously, O'Veal was enough there in the performance to think they might even go to Cheltenham, or do you think they'll scrub it off this year?
Well, Nichols Canyon, I mean, he looks like the ideal candidate to go and repeat what Champagne Fever and Very Saw did, try and make all, because he did it particularly well at the weekend. I sort of thought he had a lot of faults in him beforehand in the races around this season, despite winning a Grade 1, but they didn't seem to be evident on Sunday, and he jumped particularly well. He saw off a good stablemate who Ruby Walsh himself thought he had no chance of beating on homework, but he just saw them all off. Nothing really could get into it, and I think only Windsor Park sort of picked up the piece at the end. Otherwise, that's quite disappointing, but again, sort of impressive from the winner to go clear. I think the Supreme would be the right race. Going hard like that the whole way I think, or letting Ruby probably wouldn't ride it because imagine he'd be on Duvan, but whoever rode it, if they could control the race like that, he's going to be difficult to pass. In the Neptune, I suspect people they'd have horses get stacked up behind him. Although the Neptune is not as strong, there isn't a Duvan, I don't think, in the Neptune, who looks, I would say, sort of comfortably on top at the moment. So maybe they'll take that easier option. But then again, they've been keen for Shane's Hill to go on the longer trip, longer route all season, and so they'll have to make decisions with Wiley's horses where they'll go, whether they'll split them up, whether only one will go to Cheltenham or which one will go to the Supreme. But I think Nicholas Canyon looks like a Supreme contender from that performance. Alviso Veal, I think, listening to Mullins, he was sort of changing his mind while he was being interviewed after the race about what to do. The way he ran suggested that he probably needs 2 miles, a slight drop back to 2 miles, and more conservative ride because he was quite keen. But Willie Mullins said he wanted to go up and trip with him. He doesn't want to put the gun to his head. I'm possibly thinking about Champagne Fever because he was a similar big grey horse who was quite keen, and they made him race hard early on at 2 miles, and now he doesn't seem to stay 3 miles, and they think that could be for that reason. Maybe they're thinking obviously will be a 3 miler in time, so they don't want to boom him up too early. And I think he looked like a Cheltenham contender before the weekend. Now I wouldn't be so sure. He just looks a bit too raw, a bit too big and gangly. But I'm sure the experience would do him good if he did come. And it sounds like from what he was saying after the race, it would be the Neptune. But as Roy said, he'll keep changing his mind. But yeah, I think the Mullins pair were the ones to take out of the race. Windsor Park's been latched onto by many, but he's only 4th last time by an Outlander, and I didn't think that was a particularly good race. And here, he jumped badly, that left him out the back, and then most of the others failed to get into it. I think he was just literally, as I said before, just picking up the pieces, and people seem to like him now for the Neptune, but I can't see that. The other big novice race, obviously, was the Novice Chase, which I thought was a very, very strong race, and I think the first two are high class, and they could both either go for the JLT or the RSA. And I think I'd be quite keen to back Apache Stronghold if he went for the RSA, but it sounds like the JLT is where they're going. So I thought he was slightly outpaced a couple of times, and then he picked up and stayed on strongly to beat Valsalida. And I think he'll get outpaced by the likes of Votor and the JLT, but it was a really good performance in the second. I think ran particularly well again. If he needed the race like they're suggesting, obviously he's have a big part to play in Cheltenham, and it'd be interesting to see whether he keeps Don Polly out of the RSA or whether he just sticks for that trip again and tries to reverse the form. But I think they're two leading players who have got pretensions to be Gold Cup horses next season. I think the race was that strong. The Triumph race, the juvenile hurdle, I wasn't particularly taken with. I mean, Petit Parisienne beat Calcaire, who Mullins' team clearly rate quite highly, but I think it was Prussian Dawn was in third, and that had been slammed by D. Cosimo at Gowran the time before further, and for that to be so close, it just puts a little dampener on it. And I think the Henderson horses have still got a good advantage over the Irish and the Mullins team. Yeah,
well, you're a Peace and Corps, possibly, the Simon Munir fans. Would anything from Petit Parisienne worry you on the Friday at Cheltenham? Because they went hammer and tongs. Petit Parisienne's been put up by Price Wise tonight, so I think it's only in case that the quicker the goal, it's going to be better for Petit Parisienne because she was staying on at the end. But anything for Peace and Corps to worry about?
Petit Parisienne looks very likeable. But likeable doesn't win you many triumphs, and I still have slight misgivings about Peace and Co being quite as good as he's rated. Although I've got no real issue with the rating. I look at it the same way as Coneygree. He's had an opportunity based on the information that's available at Doncaster to the guys at Time Form to give him a big rating, which he deserves. But a lot of horses who are potentially as good as him win minor races without those tools being available, and therefore go under the radar. So there's nothing under the radar at all about Peace and Co. And you see that horses who are very impressive can fall by the wayside very quickly as well. And Bristol Demai, who I thought was enormously impressive in the same colours at Chepstow, was disappointing at Sandown. So things can go wrong. Hargam's come back on the scene, obviously. We mentioned him last week. But there was nothing. The Irish juveniles don't look anything out of the ordinary. I'd like to see Des McDonough have something that goes well at the festival, given those who remember Monksville, etc. But it's getting reasonably hard to see beyond the front two in the market there, and I didn't think the Leopardstown form was anything special at all. But then again, we probably said the same last year. And you had, I wouldn't have had Tiger Roll in a million years for the Triumph this time last year, and I wouldn't have had Guitar Pete as anything special either. So you can be surprised by these, and the way Irish juveniles are run means that we tend to think that the UK runners are much more solid, but every year the Irish tend to pull something out of the hat. So maybe we shouldn't underestimate the British GM, but at single figure prices, there's no appeal for me.
David, James just touched on it there about Valsalido and Don Polly. Who do you think will hold sway in that argument? Because I get the impression that Gigginstown want to go GLT for Valsalido and RSA for Don Polly. I'm guessing Mullins might try and get the Don Polly to go for the 4 miler and get a ride for his son.
Yeah, it'll probably be a bit of arm twisting, but look, the logical thing to do with Don Polly, particularly if we do get if we do get King's Palace and we do get Tony Green lining up in the RSA, the likes of Don Polly and to a lesser extent the Young Master are the ones that are going to actually benefit from that. Don Polly's got to go RSA for me, I think, and Valsalido, as James rightly pointed out, I think this Sunday's form is very, very strong, and he looks JLT all the way for me.
And is there anything in the Deloitte which caught your eye for the Supreme, or is it?
Well, I don't want to write the juvenile off quite as quickly as the other two guys. I mean, it was run at a very strong pace. Probably ludicrously say Chatham House Run and a first year went off way too quick, probably. And as such, the proximity, I know what James is saying, the proximity of Pushing Eagle sort of holds it down a little bit, but I think he's just run through beaten horses, per se, to get as close as he has. I think the front two deserve a bit more credit. Particularly Kalkir, I wasn't particularly keen on Kalkir coming into race, but actually the more I watched the replay back, Ruby was quite keen to go for home on him some way out. He obviously thought he got plenty of horse under him enough, because your first reaction when you watch it is, well, perhaps if Ruby could have had his time again, he might have held on to him for another 100 yards or whatever. But he must have felt he got plenty of horse under him at the time. And both the front two, again, they're the two that have travelled well throughout the race, really. I wouldn't be in a complete rush to write the pair of them off, as Roy says that we were writing Tiger Roll off this time last year. You wouldn't have had him in an instant, and perhaps the form's a little bit stronger than it looks.
And obviously it won't be. We have to start with AP. We'll finish with AP and Carniford Lock. Dave, is he on your Gold Cup radar, or have you got something else up your sleeve?
No, I don't think he's on my Gold Cup radar, to be honest. I mean, it speaks. I don't want to start crabbing the form and knocking this straight off, but it says a lot that he was virtually on his nose to out, and that is a mistake that would have stopped plenty of horses. But because of Leopardstown and the way that it is, he had plenty of time to gather the horse back up again before the last. You can't afford a mistake like that in a Gold Cup. That's going to set you on the back foot whenever you make it. But again, there were virtually everything had some sort of a chance turning in. There couldn't have been more than about 7 lengths first to last. I'm not convinced that the form is up to a great lot. I think there's a few horses in there now that have probably had their time. I've never been a fan of Boston Bob. It's almost criminal to say that a horse of his talent's almost trickless, but I still can't work out what Boston Bob's best trip is. I think it's 2-4-2-6, but I wouldn't swear to it. The way that he's been staying on here, someone will say, oh, well, the Gold Cup triple suits him that much better. I don't think it does. I think he's just a little bit less. and he's just run through a few. I mean, again, the proximity of Texas Jack almost sort of holds it down. The one to take out of it, if there is one, is Lord Windermere, it looks like he might just be coming back to something like his best of last year now, and for much of the contest, looked like the winner. He will probably be the one of those that you would like out of that race that once that you can say, well, he's going to peak on the day. Couldn't be ruling him out of it. In an Open Gold Cup, you couldn't be ruling him out of a repeat of last year. But I don't think the form's actually up to that much. If I'm honest, and again, it's another great ride for McCoy. Fantastic, but it's not for me, I'm afraid.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Any other business, gents? Anything? Nothing?
Nothing for me.
James, I was going to say, Ruby Walsh was on Alley Combiers when Paul Townend won on Nichols Canyon, so could do his JP McManus. Chances a fair bit on if he got the ride on Nichols Canyon. Obviously not in their colours, but still a Grade 1 and 2.
Yeah, I think whichever race he goes for will probably be on that horse. I think Ruby will probably ride Duvan and Supreme, or maybe Ruby keeps it in the Neptune, but I think he might well end up in the Stream. Yeah, you're right. He could boost his chances there. I think a jockey that could be in that sort of realm in the future won another bumper at the weekend on Sunday when you were there. David Bellins. I think watching all these Irish bumpers this season, he's been so impressive, and I'm sure he's got a massive future in front of him. He keeps outdoing Patrick Mullins, and I'm not sure he's enjoying that, but he is turning pro, so I think he's quite an exciting prospect.
I think Paul's been on previously talking a lot about Potter's Point, so I personally I wouldn't give up hope on him, because when he was beaten a fortnight ago over 2 mile 2 on heavy ground, he looked to stay, so wasn't surprised to see him beat on Saturday over a flat 2 miles and better ground, so I wouldn't be giving up on him too quickly. Dave, anything for you? Anything going forward?
Need to give, it's not often we give Plumpton a mention, is it? But I think we need to give Traffic Fluid a bit of a big up. I know he's a horse that a couple of us on here have liked on a couple of occasions this season, and I think he jumped better here. That was the key. All right, you can argue the race as 40 bits. I mean, King's Bandit never got involved in the race, but nevertheless, Seventh Sky's been a perfectly good horse this season, and he's been improving with a few runs. And Rory hates the word yardstick. I know he does, so I'll use that word just to annoy him. He's been a solid yardstick this season, and the way that he's quickened away from him, I thought was quite impressive. Gary Moore was speaking in raptures about him afterwards, and I think there'll be one of the novice handicaps will be on the cards for him this spring, either be it at Sandown or Cheltenham.
Happy to bring Plumpton into the equation, Dave. Right, this time next week we'll probably be talking the brilliant Leopardstown, which we have in offer, which you'd probably see VRAC go off at 1 to 2 or something like that. And obviously we've got the Kingwell and many other races to chat about. Dave, James, Rory, thanks a lot for your time this evening, and we shall see you all next week.
Pleasure.
Good stuff. Thanks very much.